So I'll introduce myself. I'm Karen Hills. I manage the Sustainable Farms and Fields program with the Commission. And thanks for joining today. I'm just going to do an overview of the Alternative Manure Management funding opportunity that's currently open. The recording of this webinar and an updated frequently asked questions document will be posted on the Sustainable Farms and Fields website after once they're available. Sometimes it takes a few days for the video to get up there, but just as a heads up, we have consolidated in case you were looking for all the climate smart livestock focused sustainable farms and fields information. We've consolidated it back into the Sustainable Farms and Fields website. And so you may just need to scroll down on that website to find the alternative manure management information. And Toyo with SCC Communications is here today helping me monitor the chat as well and dropping in some links as we go. All right, so we are just going to start with a little background information on the funding opportunity. This is the second time that we've had this open. There's a couple of slight changes that I'll try to point out as we go through in case anyone was applied the last time and might be familiar with some of the materials, but there may be folks on here as well that have not applied for this funding before, so we'll go through some of the details as well, including the objective of the funding, the eligibility, some information about the application and how the applications will be scored. And then we should have some time at the end for questions and answers to get into some specifics. Okay, just in terms of background, this funding is coming from the one-time proviso that came to the Commission in 2023 that was really focused on climate smart livestock management. $22 million of that proviso funding was tagged for anaerobic digesters. The digester funding has been moved at a reduced total to the Department of Commerce and they're currently working on implementing the digester funding. So essentially that left us at the Commission with three specific funding opportunities that rolled out last biennium, and you can see totals for funding that was allocated, numbers and projects, and numbers of districts that participated in each. This funding, of course, is from the Climate Commitment Act, so it has a few different requirements that we'll talk some more about. There was funding for alternative manure management that was moved to the capital budget, and we had a technical correction in the language associated with that appropriation that was corrected for this biennium. So there was 2.9 million. There's 2.9 million in capital for alternative manure management. We have 2.8 million to allocate. The rest is going to staff support, and then we hold aside some in case there's unanticipated cultural resource costs that come up with the projects that are funded. So maybe Toyo, could you drop the link to the RFA into the chat? We're just going to talk a little bit about the objective of this funding and what kind of projects might qualify. And we can get into some specific questions after we go through this about, if you have a project in mind and you're not sure if it would be a good fit for this funding or not, we can talk more. So this funding is really designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with manure handling systems. And this through grants to conservation districts and other public entities. And there's a couple of important things in terms of eligibility. The lead applicant must be a conservation district or other public entity. If an individual producer is interested in this funding, they need to work with a conservation district or other public entity to apply. And the projects must occur on livestock operations where manure is stored in anaerobic or liquid form. So typically this is dairies. There may be some other situations where that's the case as well that are not dairies, but I'm going to say most of the liquid manure storage is taking place at dairies. The timeline for this funding is the application is currently open, and we're doing the first pull of applications on September 2nd, and then application pulls every other month on the first business day of the month. So it would be November, January, et cetera, until all of the funding has been allocated. And we'll keep that updated on the website and via communications to let folks know when we've reached the point where we're not accepting any more applications. And this grant goes through the biennium. So the projects have until June 30th of 2027 to finish. So a couple of questions that you might ask yourself if you're wondering if a particular project is eligible. Just start out with, does the producer manage manure in the liquid form? And is the project expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? This could happen through reducing solids in the lagoon with a separator, or reducing emissions due to, using fuel to manage the manure, including transporting the manure to fields for eventual application. So the last biennium of the projects that were funded, most of them were separator projects, but there were a couple of pipeline type projects funded as well. Okay, so in terms of eligibility, and this is all from the RFA, we do have some practices that may be included in a application for this funding. It's not required that these practices are included. This is just kind of a list of some possibilities. If you end up having a project that doesn't really fit into one of these practice codes, then let's talk more about it and whether it would make a good fit. And importantly, you can include sort of the upstream and downstream components in addition to these practices that are needed to successfully implement the project. And that could include, like I say, transport for eventual application, or anything that's needed ahead of these practices to get the waste to the form that's needed. Okay, so in terms of eligible expenses, this funding can pay for engineering costs related to the project, permitting costs, cultural resource review, construction costs, and technical assistance to implement the project. We're just going to ask the applicants budget out what those costs are anticipated to be to the best of their ability. We already talked about the expected period of the grant. There were a few applications from the last alternative manure management round that were not able to be funded because all of the available funds had been allocated. And if folks are resubmitting those applications, they can do so. They just need to get updated bids. And of course, make sure that the producer is still interested in moving forward. And then the TA costs are limited to 25% of the project costs. So typically these are pretty large, expensive projects. So generally that won't be the limiting factor, but last time we had a limitation on TA requests over 100, if projects were over 100,000. That's not going to be the case this time. Maximum requests. So in the last time that we ran this, we had the maximum request at 200,000. Because this funding is being administered kind of under the umbrella of Sustainable Farms and Fields, we don't have a maximum request. However, all projects that are funded where the kind of project implementation costs outside of the TA are over 100,000, we'll need to go to our executive director for an exception to the $100,000 per landowner per fiscal year cap. We don't anticipate any issues arising with that where the review committee is moving the projects forward for funding. Okay, and one important piece of this application is calculating the greenhouse gas savings that are expected to occur, or I guess I should say emissions reductions that are expected to occur as a result of the project. And the tool that we are pointing folks to use, if at all possible, is this California Air Resource Board Alternative Manure Management Program tool that was modified for Washington, or Comet Farm is another possibility. And if neither of those are used at the application stage, let's talk about the tool that you're using. Kind of the reason that we are really pushing this CARB AMP tool is because this is how Ecology is asking the commission to report on greenhouse gas emissions reductions from this funding source. So even if, let's say, I know that some dairies are using this Farm ES program to calculate emissions reductions. Even if they've done that for the project, they're still going to need the information using the CARB AMP tool. And it's really not too tricky of a tool. So I think having that done on the front end is really helpful for us to be able to compare apples to apples in terms of project impact. Okay. Let's go into scoring criteria, and there's a link to some more detail on scoring criteria. We have a group of reviewers that's going to be evaluating these applications, and these are the criteria that they're using. So kind of the basic categories are here, and then the link has some details within each of those categories, what they will be looking for. Project plan and long-term viability within the application, which Doyle can also drop the link to the application in at some point in the chat. There's a narrative template and a work plan template for applicants to use, and basically looking at what is the plan and how is it set up for success and long-term viability. We're looking at the project readiness, including a description of how the project will impact the dairy nutrient management plan, and where the producer is in the process of getting any permits that are needed. The budget we're asking for, including any sources of other funds that are being used towards the project. And we just give examples of budgets and budget justifications that provide the requested level of detail. Of course, districts set their own cost share rate. So that is something that is determined by the particular conservation district submitting the application. And then we're just asking that costs be broken out by best management practice. Importantly, I should say that we are asking, because of the scope and scale of these projects, we are asking that these be entered in CPDS at the time of application. just to make the process a little smoother. And then there's 10 points for leverage. So basically asking how will these funds be leveraged to use other sources available. This funding could complement NRCS EQIP funding in some cases. And some producers have been able to get support from private industry, sometimes the milk buyers, to also put funding towards projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the estimated greenhouse gas emissions will be 25 points. Other environmental benefits, just kind of your chance to talk about water quality improvements, nutrient management, kind of how this project will impact other benefits and kind of make the farm overall, sorry, lost my train of thought there, overall help with environmental benefits on the farm. And then we have environmental justice and support for underserved populations. So this is a chance to explain how the project addresses environmental justice or emphasizes support of and participation by underserved or overburdened populations. And there's a new section of the application which will look familiar to those of you who did Climate Commitment Act reporting, where it's our chance to collect information on how the proposed project may provide direct and meaningful benefits to vulnerable populations within the boundaries of overburdened communities. So that's not required. I mean, it's required to fill that in. It's not required that the project provide those benefits, but we are required to collect the information. And up to 5 additional points may be added by the reviewers for projects that were previously submitted but not funded during the last round. Okay, so like I said, this is CCA funding. This time we are asking applicants to complete the pre-application notification before the application. Last time we didn't have all the guidance ready, so we had folks do it before the funding was awarded. But now, since we have it, it's kind of a simple form letter. There's instructions on the SCC website at the address given on the bottom there to get that done. It's not hard, but it's just like another step that you'll want to build in a little bit of time for. And then also be aware that even though the reporting for this or the funding goes across the biennium, there will be annual CCA reporting requirements. So even if the project isn't complete, we're going to need to come back to you in June of next year and say how much was spent on this, and get a little bit of information that you wouldn't necessarily expect for a project that goes across the biennium. Okay, that is all for my presentation. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions.
Erin, is the CARB AMP located on the Sustainable Farms and Field website?
Yeah, so probably, I think we need to get that back up there. The easiest way to get to it is through the application at this moment. We will get I need to double check that the CARB AMP tool was moved over to Sustainable Farms and Fields, but it is definitely available on the application. And we'll get it up on Sustainable Farms and Fields if it's, when we did our rearranging, that's one piece I still need to check on. And there's also a webinar that I know is on there. The webinar we did on using that tool last year, that is still relevant.
Thank you. Then I have another question about the Climate Commitment Act, and I might be very much confused. I was thinking that because of those funds that we're required to send a letter to the tribes. Am I totally
Yeah.
off base on that?
Yep, that's true. That is the pre-application notification piece there is um, where you're sending a letter to any tribes in the area. And there's real specific instructions, including a template to use um, on, I can probably drop that link in to the chat on where that information is housed on the SCC website. Just give me a second because I'm not good at multitasking here. Okay. Oh, thanks, Toyo. Okay, so this is the I just dropped the link for the CCA requirements, which I'll just share my screen with these in case it's helpful for those of you that haven't been through this process before. Um, hopefully you can see that. So essentially there's instructions to download here and a letter template, and it tells you who to send these when you send this notification, who to send it to in addition to the tribes is up here. And we're just requesting that if you're sending, you can put multiple projects. If you're submitting multiple applications, you can put multiple projects in one letter, and that's usually preferable to submitting them separately. And then if you go down further on the website, you will see a contact list for tribal natural resource directors. So this is just so you can find out who specifically to address um, this notification to. And then if any of the folks that you send it to reach out and have questions or want to talk more about the projects, then go ahead and do that. And if you run into any questions, concerns, you can always contact your regional manager or Kate Delavan at the SCC for additional guidance. Does that help?
Yes, and then my question is that my project's already been cleared by the tribes and by DAP. So this letter is still required, even though it's been cleared and I have letters showing that they have no concern.
I guess that's a good question. I might follow up with you on that. By fish, what about fish and wildlife? I guess is another one that's on here. So probably the answer is just to go through the steps anyway, but I'm happy to like connect you with I guess with Kate. I think Kate's been taking the lead on this. And see if there's any other guidance. But typically if it's like not everyone has been contacted, I would say probably just do it again so that they're all on the same email. But maybe there's some possibilities there. I'm not sure.
And if is there a wait period, much like when you send a regular easy one to the tribes and to DAP, they have 30 days to respond. And if that 30 days is up, then you can go forward with the project. Is that the same thing here? There's that 30-day wait
No,
period.
my understanding is that there's not a wait period, that you just proceed. Um, yeah. And I guess letter template. I haven't looked at this letter in about a year. Um, but yeah, you can look at the information, the letter template and then the process that's laid out on the website and um,
Okay, I
get
can do that. You don't need to
yeah,
go through that.
yeah. I don't seem to think there's a wait period, but I guess I feel like I want to double check that, and I can put that in the FAQs and follow up with you. That's Renee, right? Who's
No,
always
it's Elaine.
Oh, it was Elaine. Okay, sorry. I was like, that doesn't sound like Renee. Okay. Yeah, let me follow up with you on those two questions, Elaine.
Okay, thanks.
Hmm.
I do have a question though.
Hmm.
This is Renee. So I started looking at the application and you and I have already discussed my producer that got some of his projects installed last year with his AMM funding, but didn't get everything installed, so I'm going to reapply. So that is not considered a resubmission, correct? Those are folks that did not get funded at all.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking.
Yeah. That's good clarification.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I think we might wrap up and give you half an hour back. Definitely as you work through this and if there's specific items that are um, unique about your project that you want to talk through or questions that come up, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, we'll look forward to getting some great projects funded this biennium.